What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we're going to be comparing the new TCL Stylus 5G to the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G. Now, if you want an affordable smartphone with that built-in stylus, these are pretty much your two options right now. The TCL Stylus is brand new. TCL has never had a stylus smartphone before this one. Motorola, on the other hand, has had quite a few G styluses these past couple of years. Both phones certainly have their pros and cons, and if you just want the quick summary, the TCL Stylus is more affordable, certainly the better deal and all-around value, with some unique and useful stylus-specific apps, while the Moto G Stylus is the better phone spec-wise, with its screen, internal components, camera, but Motorola hasn't innovated much with their stylus experience, and for the price especially, it's a tougher sell. We definitely have a lot to go over here, so I won't waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and get right into it and see what these two stylus smartphones have to offer. So first things first, let's actually talk about pricing and availability. Now, the TCL Stylus at the moment is exclusive to T-Mobile and their prepaid brand Metro. It might be more widely available later on, and the full retail price for this guy is about $270. But chances are, whether you're a new or existing customer, T-Mobile will likely give you some sort of deal if you sign up for a carrier plan with them. The Moto G Stylus 5G is also available from T-Mobile, but it's sold unlocked directly from Motorola and from places like Amazon and Best Buy as well. And depending on where you get it from, the prices actually vary quite a bit. T-Mobile customers can snag this phone for $299 with a carrier plan, but unlocked, the full retail price of the Moto G Stylus is $499. That's a ton of money for a phone like this, nearly twice the price compared to TCL's Stylus. Now, Motorola has been discounting this phone off and on in a bunch of different ways, direct discounts, gift card add-ons, but either way, the Moto G Stylus is significantly more expensive than the TCL Stylus, and that's absolutely the first major consideration with these two phones. By the way, if you're interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, I'll leave some links down below in the video description to where you can get these phones at their cheapest current prices. Physically, I think you can tell that both these phones are pretty close with their size and design. The TCL Stylus is technically a 6.81-inch device. That's the screen size corner to corner. The Moto G Stylus is 6.8 inches exactly, but that extra 100th of an inch doesn't make a difference. Up top, both phones have similar center hole punch selfie cameras. Along the sides, slim but noticeable bezels, and across the bottom, they both have a more prominent chin. They are very tall, lengthy devices. They kind of have that extended 20.5:9 aspect ratio, a bit of a stretch to reach the top edge and corners on both, but I suppose if you're used to big phones, most devices nowadays are pretty big anyway, you'll be used to these. And in the hand, both phones do feel about the same. Around back, all plastic builds with just varying fits and finishes. The Moto G Stylus comes in two colors, steel blue and this funky metallic seafoam green. The TCL Stylus only comes in this lunar black finish. Aside from that, the rear housing is plastic, the sides and edges are a thicker metal-like material on both. The Moto G Stylus, I guess, is a little more curvy and contoured. The TCL Stylus is flatter and more squared off, but nothing substantially noticeable. The only other thing worth mentioning is that the Moto G Stylus has Motorola's water repellent distinction for added protection. The TCL Stylus doesn't seem to have any waterproofing or certification that I'm aware of. Neither phones have wireless charging either. Overall, similar mid-range builds from start to finish. And just taking a quick look around at everything else, on the left side, both phones do have dual SIM and SD card trays for expandable storage. Though I should mention the TCL Stylus comes with 128 gigs of built-in storage, while the Moto G Stylus has 256 gigs. On the right side, similar volume buttons placed just above the power buttons, which double as the fingerprint sensors on both. And just testing these out, to me, the TCL Stylus seems to have the faster fingerprint sensor when it comes to waking and unlocking the phone. It requires just the slightest of taps and seems to unlock almost instantly. The Moto G Stylus, on the other hand, has more of a delay as it wakes and unlocks. I think that's pretty noticeable, not too important, but I just thought I'd point that out. At the bottom, both phones still have their headphone jacks, USB-C ports in the middle, downward speaker setups, and of course their respective styluses, which I'll talk more about in just a second. Up top, the TCL Stylus does have a secondary speaker in the earpiece, the Moto G Stylus does not, and around back, lots of different camera lenses on both, which I'll go more in depth with later on. So let's now talk about the stylus setups and all the apps and features that go along with that. since it's kind of the whole point of these two phones. To start off, both devices do have a very similar stylus setup. The styluses are located at the bottom right of both devices, and they each have sort of a clickable pop-out mechanism. The TCL Stylus has an additional magnetic sort of pull when you slide the stylus back in, which is nice. The Moto G Stylus doesn't really have that, but generally speaking, taking the styluses in and out of each device is essentially the same. The styluses themselves do differ quite a bit. The TCL Stylus is a thicker, flatter profile pen, I guess sort of rectangularly shaped. The Moto G Stylus is very much just a thin, round metal pointer, not quite as nice or as high quality. The pen tips are also a little different. TCL's is noticeably sharper. And in the hand, honestly, TCL Stylus does just feel more substantial, more durable, thicker, nicer all around. It's definitely what I prefer. Besides that though, neither stylus is smart or otherwise connected to their devices. There's no Bluetooth or wireless connection, no button controls, no actual features with the styluses alone. They are just simple little sticks and nothing more. Now, the first use case with the styluses, of course, is to just utilize them as an extension of your finger. On both devices, you can tap, touch, swipe, and scroll through the phone just like you would your thumb, and it's the same basic experience on both. When you pull the styluses out, each phone will also automatically bring up shortcut menus, which display all the stylus features each phone offers. It's sort of a full screen menu on the TCL Stylus, more of a side menu on the Moto G Stylus, and at a glance, there are actually quite a few similar apps, tools, shortcuts, and options that go along with both styluses. For example, both phones have a simple note-taking app where you can draw pictures, write handwritten or typed notes, and I think this is pretty straightforward. While the app designs differ a little bit, it's the same basic idea, and if you've used any stylus phone over the last couple of years, you know what this is about. Both phones also have screenshot editors, screen recorders as well, but there are a number of apps and tools that are unique to each device. Motorola, for example, gives you a coloring book to help pass the time and make some sort of art. TCL has a more robust name brand note app called Nebo, which is actually a fairly mainstream paid-for note taker that can also transform written notes to type text, allows you to edit documents, and a whole lot more. There's also MyScript Calculator, another powerful paid app that's basically a math solver. You can write out even fairly complex math equations and have them solved right there. There's an e-signing app and magnifier tool. Now on both phones, you can add, edit, and change the stylus shortcut menus, and you can see all the stylus apps associated with each device here. There's about a dozen on each phone. Some are more useful than others, and I personally think TCL offers the more useful set of apps. Motorola's coloring book, for example, isn't a necessity, and one of the pre-installed apps on the Motorola phone is Google's own Keep Notes. And this is why I mentioned early on that I don't personally think Motorola has done as much to improve their stylus app experience or otherwise offer useful or exclusive things. However, you can of course just install any stylus apps you want yourself outside of Motorola or TCL's own, and you can have shortcuts to those stylus apps you install yourself or any other apps on your device. The other thing that's important to understand is that because neither phone is really made for their styluses, and vice versa, the styluses aren't connected to the phones, the writing experiences on both is fairly rudimentary. It's not like Samsung's S Ultra or an Apple Pencil. You're gonna see some lag and latency with your lines, and in my opinion, it's about the same experience on both. The TCL Stylus maybe offers a little smoother, a little more precise experience with its sharper tip, but the difference is very subtle. All in all, there's no real advantage here with the actual writing and drawing, and this is just a product of both phones offering a super basic stylus experience. In general, the stylus aspect of these two stylus smartphones is very similar. I think TCL has a couple of advantages. The stylus itself physically is nicer. TCL also brought a couple really robust paid apps to pair with their stylus experience. Motorola, on the other hand, hasn't really changed their stylus experience really in the last 3 years. So if you've had a Moto stylus before, you already know what you're getting. I think most people will be installing their own stylus apps on these phones regardless, and if that's the case, I don't see a huge advantage either way there. But in the end, these are really the only two stylus smartphones on the market right now, besides the $1,000 plus S22 Ultra, which is just an entirely different league. When When it comes to the display and some of the other internal specs, this is actually where the Moto G Stylus has some advantages. The similarly sized 6.8-inch-ish displays on both phones are IPS LCD panels. They're the same 2460 by 1080 resolution and pack in about 395 pixels per inch. At a glance, the viewing experiences to me look fairly similar, colorful for what they are, plenty sharp for the size as well, but not quite as bright or as bold as some OLED panels from similarly priced devices. I do actually think the TCL Stylus is the brighter screen at max brightness, and TCL also offers their Next Vision add-on, which allows you to adjust the color, contrast, and other display elements a bit more to get exactly the right kind of screen calibration you're looking for. But the big advantage here on the Moto G Stylus is that its screen is a 120 Hz high refresh rate. The TCL Stylus is just a 60 Hz display, so your taps, touches, and swipes on the Moto G Stylus do feel faster and more responsive. It's a little tough to see on camera, but in person, as you use both phones, the difference is more apparent. And to be honest, that 120 Hz mode is kind of a flagship feature in some capacity. That is the only real technical advantage though when it comes to the displays. The color and the overall look is sort of subjective, the resolutions are the same, they're both LCD, so the viewing experiences are close. With this, it's just a matter of deciding whether or not 120 Hz is important to you, and honestly, like I said, I do think that's a pretty solid feature on the Moto G Stylus. When it comes to the out loud listening experience, I actually think TCL has the advantage here. Both phones, of course, offer their downward facing speaker, but the TCL Stylus also has a secondary speaker in the earpiece, and I think this allows for a fuller sound overall. I like a dual speaker setup on my smartphones. My biggest issue here though is just that Motorola used to offer this setup, but they took it away a couple of years ago for whatever reason. But here's a sound sample from each so you can decide for yourself. When it comes to the internal specs, interestingly enough, I actually thought that the Moto G Stylus would have more of an advantage here, but actually the difference in speed and performance wasn't as significant as I thought. Inside, the TCL Stylus is powered by the MediaTek Dimensity 700 chipset and 4 gigs of RAM. The Moto G Stylus gets the Snapdragon 695 and 8 gigs of RAM. Here are the Geekbench scores on both, which should give you some idea of the potential power. Like I said, while the Moto G Stylus is objectively better, it's not so much better where you'd think it were significant. And actually in practice, the TCL Stylus to me seems to offer a smoother, more responsive, and more optimized user experience. Both phones are updated to Android 12 and their respective Android skins. Neither is at all close to a stock Android experience, so you first have to decide if you're okay with Motorola's Moto skin or TCL's Android setup. In my experience, while I'm more used to Motorola's Android experience, I've noticed that it just isn't as well optimized as even TCL's here. The apps are a little slower and clunky to open sometimes, the animations are less fluid. TCL's setup definitely takes some getting used to, but I actually think they did a much better job just making the phone feel fast. Now, with more RAM in the Moto G Stylus, eventually this phone is going to be faster as you start to load up more and more apps and go back to some stuff you had preloaded. There's no doubt that having twice the amount of RAM makes a pretty big difference, but honestly, the difference isn't multiple hundreds of dollars better, like the prices would suggest. And to be honest, I thought Motorola's devices this year in particular were a bit underpowered for what they are. Again, I think this comes down to Motorola versus TCL's Android setups more than the actual specs, but in my mind, for what you're paying for on the Moto G Stylus, I'm just not seeing that significant of an advantage. As far as the battery size and longevity, this does favor Motorola quite heavily. The Moto G Stylus gets a good sized 5,000 mAh battery inside, while the TCL Stylus has a 4,000 mAh battery. And actually, in just using these phones the past couple of hours to film this video, you can absolutely see the percentage difference between them. The TCL Stylus is going to have a bit worse battery life throughout the day. That's just expected with the less capacity, and while it may not necessarily be significant based on your individual usage, it could be noticeable, all things considered. considered. Finally, when it comes to the cameras, these phones are a little different with the hardware. On the TCL Stylus, we actually get 4 lenses, a 50 megapixel f1.8 aperture main lens, 5 megapixel 115 degree ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The Moto G Stylus has 3 lenses, a similar 50 megapixel f1.9 aperture main, an 8 megapixel 118 degree ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Up front, there's a 13 megapixel selfie on the TCL, a 16 megapixel on the Moto, and inside the camera app, I actually think both these phones have a ton of great features that allow you to get the most out of those camera setups. Now, a couple of things worth mentioning. First, they of course both have the ultra wide angle, but they also both have macro. The G Stylus doesn't have the dedicated lens, but it does offer it as a shooting mode. The TCL Stylus doesn't seem to have a dedicated night mode for whatever reason, but both phones offer a wide array of other features specific to each device, like spot color and dual lens capture on the Moto, light tracing on the TCL. There's pro controls on both, high megapixel shooting, no 4K video here. The Moto G Stylus can at least shoot 60 FPS 1080 video, the TCL cannot. They both have enhanced video stabilization though, but when it comes to just the actual pictures, I think it's pretty obvious that the Moto G Stylus has a clear advantage. Overall, Motorola is just able to deliver a more colorful, more detailed, more finished looking shot, especially with its post-processing. TCL tends to give you a lot to work with, but the images, both with the selfies and with the rear lenses, tend to be a bit overexposed, kind of over brightened, not as colorful. There's plenty of detail though, which is great, but I think all in all, Motorola's Moto G Stylus is going to be the better picture taker across the board in more ways than one. So in summary, I still think TCL's new Stylus 5G is a great overall value. For well under $300, you get a phone that offers a familiar stylus experience with a couple really powerful apps, well-optimized software, bright display, dual speaker setup. Motorola's Moto G Stylus is no doubt the better device spec-wise. It has a 120Hz display, twice as much RAM, a better processor, better battery, more capable cameras, but its stylus experience has remained unchanged for the last 3 years. And unlocked, it retails for $500. It's not a $500 device, no matter how you look at it. For $400, it's better, but I still think it's a pass. If you're a T-Mobile customer specifically, and you can pick between 2 great carrier discounts for these 2 phones, sure, you should probably opt for the Moto G Stylus in that case. But what do you guys think? Which phone would you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.